Hello and welcome again to the Binteger podcast. My name is Biniam. I'm the host of this podcast. This is the place where we talk integrity. Integrity calls and wholeness responds. That is our tagline to this podcast, and something I deeply resonate with that makes coming back every day and being a part of this podcast such a pleasure. I enjoy digging deep into this theme of integrity, exploring it from so many facets, a year's worth of chatting and exploring and experiencing and pursuing living with integrity. My goodness, what a commitment. But it's not something I'm doing from scratch as of this year. It's something that I've been pursuing for a few years now, and I have come to commit to this theme as what I feel to be one of the most important conversations that needs to be happening right now. There are some amazing conversations on the theme of integrity in a topical fashion, which means just one-off conversations here and there online, but I haven't seen anything that is devoted. There's a couple of books, which are also not bad, but this podcast aims to focus and hone in and dig deep in this theme in such a way whereby you, the listener, you, the ones who are consuming this content, may hopefully see the merits of pursuing and committing your lives to walking with integrity, and in the process, thereby be transformed. Hence why the tagline, integrity calls. It calls to each and every one of us. And I hope that that's what you hear when you listen into the various deep dives we do from various angles again on this theme. Integrity is calling each and every one of us. And as it calls, when we respond, the promise it offers is wholeness. Wholeness as in alignment, both in our internal values that are expressed in our external actions, as we be honest with ourselves and respectful of those around us. Now, before we do embark in today's theme, which is vulnerability with integrity, that's what we're talking about today, I want to do a quick feelings check-in. This is my way of in the moment practicing integrity for myself. How am I doing today? Today, speaking of vulnerability, I'm talking about vulnerability because I had a tremendously vulnerable disclosure to share with my new girlfriend. I am recently in a relationship and it's pretty exciting, like super exciting. But part of this also comes with me fleshing out and walking into the ideals that I've espoused for such a long time. And in this zone of romantic exploration, I'm feeling in a very vulnerable spot because of the progression to this wonderful individual. I'm a little scared. I'm a little scared about some of the thing, like the progress of the connection, some of the fears of what could happen should this not go well. And this morning I had a chance, she's on the other side of the world at the moment for a few months. So we're doing the distance relationship thing. But as we were chatting on our early morning date, I was sharing with her some of the insecurities that I had been observing that I was unaware of. And so that was, it was a very, really vulnerable time for the two of us. She was listening and struggling with what she was listening to, but also making space for it in a beautiful way. And as I was sharing, and I mean, we were both in tears, we were both expressing some raw emotions. It was a beautiful thing. So there's uncertainty, and there was fear, and there was feelings of inadequacy as well too. And so that's how I was feeling then. But as a result of going through the day and now in this moment, I'm feeling more confident that was the right move. Once upon a time, I would have been scared and I would not have done that. And I would not have experienced intimacy and closeness, because I think that's one of the things that vulnerability does usher in, is that closeness. And that's one of the things I was sharing with her, is if I didn't get a chance to share this with you, I would feel more distant because I didn't feel I could be open. And that's one of the values that I want to experience, is that closeness and that openness. And so that's where I'm at right now, is I'm feeling more confident as a result of that conversation. I'm feeling also supremely affirmed because at work, I'm continuing to get a lot of wonderful, positive feedback from my the owners of the company and the managers that I work with about the work that I'm doing and the way that they've got my back. And so that's really wonderful. I'm really grateful for that. Let me, my dear Bintegers, I call you Bintegers, especially the way I define Bintegers is those who are seeking wholeness through pursuing a walk with integrity. So if that's you, you're a fellow Binteger. Otherwise, my fellow listeners as well, let me share with you some unpleasant emotions. I'm just sharing vocabulary words here that could hopefully aid you in choosing specific words when you're experiencing them. So these are unpleasant emotions that arise when you feel like your needs aren't being met. So there's depressed, there's indifference, impatience, exhausted, and apprehensive. Once again, depressed, indifference, impatient, exhausted, and apprehensive. Now, if you're experiencing any of these emotions, there are some words there that could help describe what's going on for you. And we love legitimizing these emotions. These are legitimate emotions and they have a space, they have a part to play. And so you'll hear me on this podcast saying the whole range of emotions are beautiful in their expression. We want to give space for them to be expressed. 5 positive or pleasant emotions that you might feel when your needs are being met include blessed, proud, fascinated, amused, and intrigued. Blessed, proud, fascinated, amused, and intrigued. May those serve you well as you continue to practice checking in with yourself and legitimizing these emotions that we all experience. All of us experience these broad ranges of emotions, and we're just learning together how to affirm them, to legitimize them, to say this is worthwhile experiencing, savoring, even if they're uncomfortable, that they have a part to play. Now, today, like I said, I'm talking about the theme of vulnerability alongside integrity. So how do we experience vulnerability with integrity? What is vulnerability in the first place? I could read you like a textbook or a dictionary summation, but I wanted to come up with my own definition of vulnerability, and I'd encourage you to do the same. What does vulnerability to you look like? How do you experience and describe what vulnerability is? For me, vulnerability is a willingness to be seen as you truly are, despite the unknown outcome. Most of us like to only walk into spaces where we know what's going to happen, but to walk into an unfamiliar space is a really scary thing. Now, vulnerability is when you're willing to be seen as you truly are, like the real you, without having to put on any airs, it's kind of like the real you emotionally, the real you at the core, the real you character-wise. Who are you really? Expressing that, whatever your interests are, whatever your thoughts are, like what is inside of you that you're usually not accustomed to sharing because you're not sure how others are going to receive you. Expressing that willingly, despite not knowing what the outcome could be. So for example, this morning as I was on that date with my girlfriend, who's around the other side of the world, so we're doing it through WhatsApp. But as we're doing so, and as I embarked on sharing my vulnerable emotions and insecurities, I was supremely vulnerable. I was willing for her to see me in a zone that I don't feel comfortable usually being seen in. Like, who wants to be seen in their weak points, right? Who wants to sort of make that accessible? But that's what I felt was important. So I said, here is some of the insecurities that I'm observing and working through, and I want you to know that. Now, the outcome, I had no idea what the outcome was going to be on her side. Was she going to say, this is a deal breaker and I don't want this anymore? Or was she going to say, hey, I got you through this? It was more of the latter, by the way, if you're wondering. But I did not know the outcome before I embarked on it. And it's that scary zone, that vulnerable zone where we offer our real selves despite not knowing how we're going to be received. It could be anywhere from rejection, mocking, maybe being made fun of, to affirming, to celebrate. Like, there's just a whole range of ways that we could be, we could have that experience turn out, and we don't know what it is. So why is vulnerability such a difficult thing for so many of us? Why is vulnerability such a difficult thing for us to experience? Why do most of us shy away from vulnerability? And why do we avoid opportunities to express vulnerability? What do you guys think about this? I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to share mine, of course, but I would love to hear some of the ideas that you have of why you think that vulnerability is so So scary for many that they want to avoid it at all costs. Here's what my thoughts are. I think vulnerability is difficult for so many because once upon a time, each and every one of us, when we were young, at some point when we were young, we had access to our emotions to express how we truly were. And yet in the settings in which we grew up in and the ways that we existed, like in whatever setting we grew up in, like in our homes or maybe at schools, some events happened where we experienced pain when we expressed our true selves. We might have been loud and exuberant and and then we were told stop being loud and exuberant and settle down basically. And we were discouraged and we were even punished for whichever way it was that we wanted to express our true selves. We were punished, we were repressed, we were told settle down, we were told to lower the dim, if you will, and those were not fun experiences for most of us. Most of us experienced what that's like when we get shut down at a young age. And so at that young age, we start learning how to protect by inhibiting that expression of our real selves. We learn that it's not safe to express our real selves. We learn that what is more celebrated is that toned down version. And so where we expressed I call it a sacred openness, when you're actually showing who you truly are, like what really means to be you. That's like a sacred space there. But that got shut down and repressed. And after we've been hurt a few times, we learned how to protect that space. Because it's not fun getting hurt. It's not fun being ripped apart. And so we protect that space by building these hedges and walls around it. And then after a lifetime, dear Bintegers, of practicing how to put up that hedge, it's really difficult for others to have access to that vulnerable space of who we truly are, because that is ground zero where we have to protect ourselves. But here's the thing. I believe that all of us desire to experience real connection. And I don't think there's any way of experiencing that real connection where someone can see you for who you truly are and love you for who you truly are, despite how messy you are and despite how messy we are. It's that space where we want to be seen and celebrated and experienced. And yet the only way to get there is when we express vulnerability. Now listen, here's how it intersects with integrity, okay? I've only talked about vulnerability so far, but in the last couple of minutes, let's see if we can land this plane. It takes courage to be vulnerable, doesn't it? It takes tremendous courage. Kudos to you should you walk this pathway to experience and express vulnerability. It takes courage. It takes practice to be vulnerable. It takes practice to learn how to start expressing how you feel. That's why we do the feelings check-in at the beginning. That's a form of vulnerability, saying here's where I'm at the moment. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but yet we commit to it. It takes time to be vulnerable. This is not a snap of a finger and you're there. This is an ongoing process where you're unlearning old habits of hiding and shutting down, and now you're learning to open and express. It's going to take honesty to be vulnerable. It's going to take you being frank and transparent about saying, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I'm thinking, etc., etc. And it's also going to take wisdom. It's going to take wisdom to know when to be vulnerable and with whom to be vulnerable. It's not wise to be vulnerable with just anyone and everyone. You have to choose very carefully who's going to get this part of you, this sacred part, this vulnerable part. This is going to be shared with someone who's really trustworthy. Now, finally, it takes integrity to be vulnerable. And we say that, like, our definition of integrity is where one's internal values align with their external actions. What I've just described here is a lot of values. I've talked about courage. It takes courage, that's a value, to express vulnerability. It takes practice. Therein you think about consistency along with that practice. You're doing it over and over again and getting better at it. That's a value again, which is part of integrity. It takes patience, even as it'll take time. It takes patience to step into and become more and more vulnerable. It takes honesty and transparency. It takes wisdom and tactfulness to express it. When do you do it? When do you not do it? These are some of the elements that make it such an engagement. But my encouragement to you would be this: as you consider practicing vulnerability and expressing it with integrity, start small and build it up. Don't just take the deep dive. Start with small things so that if you goof up on those things, it doesn't hurt as bad. And you start building up your ability over time to learn how to step into vulnerability. Do it with trusted people, seek professional help, but let's normalize this. Thank you so much for listening to this 26th episode. I hope it's been helpful. Drop me your thoughts and comments down below. And I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Bye for now.